Wait. Hey. Oh, hi, Finley. Hey, Farah.
Hi,
Hi.
Susan.
So glad you're here. I don't know how many people are showing up or how many people are listening to the recording. So,
No worries. I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see you.
yeah, are you back home?
No,
In
I'm
Sweden.
in Gothenburg, Sweden right now, and it's funny because I missed group because it's at like 2:30 a.m. this time, but this workshop I'm
Is it
actually awake
10?
for. Yeah, it's like 9 o'clock. Yeah,
Oh, good,
p.m.
good, good. Okay. I'm just going to give people a few more minutes and see. And otherwise, I'll be using you as my guinea pig to back me to do ask questions to or whatever. But that's good.
Happy to help.
Good. And I know Farah's here. She's my virtual assistant, everything, every person to me. So I don't know if you're coming on, Farah, you're just going to be in the background in case anything happens. I'm going to assume that you're going to text me. Okay. All right. So, oh, okay. She can't unmute. Oh, okay. I cannot. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So she can't do something with her thing. Okay. No problem. So I'm just going to record it and get started. Okay, Finley?
I had to accept the fact that it was being recorded, and now I can do so. So hello.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, a lot of people were going to come, but it's lunch hour and I'm glad I made it. It's a very rainy day in the Bay. So there was a lot of traffic out there. Well, welcome. I'm going to start recording actually. Oh, it is recorded. Okay. I'm just going to start. And there's one chat. Is that you, Farah?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. We'll keep reading the chats from time to time. All right. All right. Can you see? I'm going to actually put that down. All right. Well, welcome to one of the very first codependent webinars that I've done. And I'm Susan Regan. I'm a relationship expert and coach and a certified mediator, co-parenting therapist, a group leader. And I'm just happy to be here with you all, just talking about codependency. One of the reasons why I've done this class today is because I feel like a lot of people that are in my groups feel stuck in a certain place and they can't seem to move themselves forward. And they see this repetition of this pattern of unhealthy dynamics in their own self that they keep sneaking out into the next relationship, even if it's the relationship that they have with their coworker or their boss or their family member. And I feel like this is really important to keep identifying codependent tendencies that we have, especially for folks who are continuing to evolve and work on their relationships. It's really important to, when am I doing that thing that I do? Or when am I picking that dynamic with another person that it feels so familiar? So that's my main reason for doing the workshop today. But a lot of it was to let you also have a little bit of time to get to know me and how I think. And let me see if there's anything else. So basically coming in today, even for myself, because I'm coming in between clients and things like that. I want to slow this time down for a minute and just have you really arrive here and figure out what you want to look at yourself. What are some of the things that have been bothering you in your own relationships and the way you approach things and the way you communicate? And just jot a few things down, things that you've been noticing in your own dynamics. And I'm going to stop a lot, look at my notes, look at the chat, ask you questions, give you some time to think and write. Because I think one of the things that will be helpful to people that even listen to this on their own is to slow down and just really think about if you resonate with anything that I'm saying, and to really write down the things that you're resonating with. And also to set a few, small goals for yourself just in this next 45 minutes. Like what are some of the things that you hope will come out that I might say, that you might think about? What are some of the things you want to explore a little bit more in yourself? So if you have a place to jot it down, even if it's on your phone, just feel free to take a minute and do that, and come here, feel your feet on the floor, take a few breaths, get comfortable, drink some water, whatever you have to do to arrive. I am going to be looking at the chat. I'm going to be letting people in. I'm going to be checking my phone because people sometimes can't get in. So I'm going to be doing all of that. Hopefully you won't notice. I'll be such an expert at it. Okay, so also, if you need to leave early, you can get the recording, you can listen to it. Just, give me a wave or say goodbye in the chat. It's totally fine if you leave, if you need to go. I know how it is during the noontime or the 9 o'clock at night time, wherever you are. Okay, so thinking about why we're here and what we might want to have be a little healthier in our connections with folks. So I want to give you a brief overview of codependency. So I think that most of us are here because the concept of relationships and love is so important. Like, this is one of the things that us humans love, is to be in good relationship and in harmony, right? That's what we crave. And it's often really challenging to figure out how to do that, especially because of the models that we get from our own families or even in our friendships. Like, we might see different couple relationships and we're like, oh, I like that part of that couple, but that part's really rough. I don't know if I'd be able to handle being with a person like that or having that dynamic. So when I do couples therapy, I always ask people, like, who's your model of relationships that you're following, and what are some of the aspects that you see in the couples around you that you really revere, and you're like, that's something I want to do more of in my relationships, even in friendships. Like, if you have what you feel like is a really well communicative friendship, that you're like, we're able to say anything to each other, we're able to be so direct. Just think about some of the positive examples that you have around you, because we're always looking at the problems, right? But we're not looking at some of the things that are working, that we're doing, that people in our lives are doing. And I kind of want to go into another section just to talk about that a little bit more, to build more of a positive base. Is, what are the relationships right now in your life that really support who you are and what you're doing, and really see you and really understand you? I want you to think about a few of those. They might be challenging at times, but they're workable. Like, you can work through things with that person. But just to think about maybe the top 3 relationships you have, that there's a lot of respect, there's a lot of mutuality, there's a lot of reciprocity, like nobody's overgiving, nobody's not able to say no. Think about people that are around you like that, because that is really an indication of you, right? Of what your capacity is. And so some of it is we want to spread that around. And when we get into intimate relationships, sometimes we lose that ability. We lose ourselves, especially if we have codependent tendencies. So the thought is to really try to relate some of your positive, healthy, emotional characteristics to all your relationships. So, and then when we look at sort of where we came from as kids and the types of families we had, we might want to think about some of the habits that you got from there, positive and negative. Like, some of this is is based on like how we attach, right? And how we attach to people is based on how we attach in our family. And there's a theorist that I follow, Hendricks, and he does imago therapy. And one of the things to think about if you're working on your intimate relationships is what are the kinds of people you're attracted to? And we could even say that in friendship, right? What kinds of people are you really attracted to? And are those people really healthy for you? Or the people that kind of are easy for you? So if you think about the people you're drawn to, oh yeah, that feels like home, like that kind of person. And then you think about, well, that other person is really good for me. What is the difference of those two qualities? And I always think about it this way, is that sometimes it's the quality is, the difference of the qualities is your insecurity, right? So I often see this in my clients that they may choose the more laid back person that they have to keep their eye on, as opposed to the really successful, disciplined person, because what does that do to them? They have to kind of up their game and be a little bit more disciplined and successful and not so laid back. Sometimes it's easier to be with people who have those kind of habits that don't push you. And so if you think about like, what's the difference between the person that I know I like that feels like home versus the person that I know that's good for me? And in a lot of the folks that are working on recovering from a long-term relationship ending, they're also working on how to heal some of the things that happened in that relationship. And one of them is to learn to be attracted to people that are healthier for them. And that's kind of hard, because like sometimes you're really not attracted to people that are healthy for you, because you've been used to, not having someone who's completely reliable or present or emotionally developed. Like it's easy. It's sometimes easier. And it mimics like what we grew up in or what you grew up in. So that thought again about the imago work of looking at the positive and negative aspect of your caretakers, because everybody has positive and negative aspects to themselves. So we usually can find that there's a combination of those positive and negative aspects of your caretakers that you have in your relationships that feel like home. So the thought is like, maybe we got to change home a little bit, that feeling of what feels like home, especially if you're a person that's really evolving and working on yourself and trying to achieve things in your life. Sometimes if you're in a codependent relationship where you spend a lot of energy either taking care of somebody or feeling like you're the person being taken care of, you don't have a lot of energy left to be your own person or to do what you want in the world, right? So sometimes our unhealthy relationships really hinder us from being and doing what we want in the world. So I'm kind of moving around. I can see how my outline is kind of moving around. So one of the things, if you're trying to heal from a codependent relationship in yourself and you're really working on your own sense of self, you need to really identify what your purpose is in your life and who's surrounding you to help you achieve that purpose. It's not like we always have to achieve, right? Sometimes we just want to be, but who helps you be the best person you can be? And who actually makes you feel like you get knocked off and in conflict and feeling kind of crazy in your head? Who are those people? And sometimes it's really clear to know that. And sometimes when you get close to that feeling of home, you kind of go into a trance. So it just feels like home and you're not quite sure of where you are anymore. Like, whoa, this is feeling kind of crazy. And that's something to notice in yourself. Like when you start feeling like you're off balance with somebody in a pretty big way. So I think it's something to notice about your own sense of why am I choosing to be in relationship? What, is this really adding something to my life? Do I really love myself when I'm with this person? Or am I in constant battle and don't know who I am when I'm with this person? So one of the things about looking at codependency and recovering from codependency is actually looking at your own self and what you need to work on in your own self. And that's why I started with that question. So recovering from codependency or your tendencies is to really work on your own sense of what works for you and your own balance, and not forgetting that when some person that you feel like, wow, I'm attracted to that kind of person walks in the room, and you forget who you are. And that might be an addictive quality that comes across you when you're back into that home feeling again. So I was at a meeting the other day, and I read they had this chart about different kinds of love, and two aspects of the different kinds of love caught my eye, and one was manic love and prama love. So they described manic love as someone who actually makes you feel crazy, and you feel like maybe it's when you're really attracted to someone, really lusting in a lust phase, you forget all your things that you're supposed to do. You're just kind of absorbed with that person. And it talked about what that does to you, right? What that does to you when you're in that kind of love. And it makes you feel off-centered, off balance. You forget what you're doing, why you're doing things. Nothing else really matters. So, and I know that most people can remember experiencing this. This is like the normal first 3 months of any relationship in some ways, but I'm talking about something that doesn't stop at the lust phase when you start getting into more of a connection, but it keeps going. That feeling of feeling off balance, like you just don't know what's going to happen next. And then pramaya love is one that feels like it's based on mutuality and compatibility and collaboration and mature, I don't know, connection, that you can actually talk about things, plan things. You have really similar values. You have a similar or collaborative, negotiated pace of life. And I thought a lot about that sign and thought it's so important. The second part that they wrote was, what does that require of you to be in prama love? And that requires that you have to have your own self-regulation, right? You have to have your own self-love, your own identity. Like you have to have your own established friends, activities that you do, things that, interest you, that you don't give all of that up for somebody, and your own self-respect. And the thing that I think is so interesting about that concept is, of course, if we have that to give, then we get to give that, right? But if we don't have that to give, or that gets wobbly when we meet somebody who we feel like is throwing us off, like they're throwing us off because we can be thrown off, right? But to be able to hold on to that prama love is the recovery of codependence, is to always be coming back to yourself for your own care and your own solidity. And then I think about how, in a way, we get these contradictory messages in society. So when I first started studying psychology, one of the assignments was to write down the songs that we heard that week. The class had to report back on the love songs that they heard, and how they denoted sort of unhealthy concepts of love. And I remember that. Do you remember that song that's called I Can't Live Without You? And those real codependent songs. And so in a way, we've been a little brainwashed to feel like we can't really be a whole person and be with another whole person, that someone actually completes us. And I wonder if, if you can think about yourself, a few of the songs that you maybe sing over and over again, that you're like, wow, that harmony there is really about codependency, and how I need somebody, and how I can't survive or be a whole person without them. So to think again of, if you want to have prama love, what do you have to develop in yourself, and what do you have to figure out how to hold on to in yourself, so that you can continue to attract what is the healthier person for you, even in friendships, and even in, I think about even in work relationships, because sometimes we have codependent tendencies in work, like we overwork, we overfunction, we overgive. We forget about ourselves. We have resentment and passive aggressive communication because we can't stand up for ourselves. So a lot of those characteristics are everywhere. But to get back to what Melanie Beattie is, one of the lead codependent educators, psychologist, and her definition of codependency is a codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. I think about it like it's a kind of a circular trap. It's kind of a repetitive dynamic. Is it them? Is it me? Obviously, if you're in a codependent relationship, it's easier to blame them and not take responsibility for your part in it. And I thought of this example that I hear a lot in my work with folks is I thought I was being supportive, but they still ended up being unhappy and upset. And I thought they were supporting me, but they weren't there for me. They didn't even show up. And the conversation to me feels like it's a trade-off, right? It's not two people really communicating about what they need and what they want and what they can do. And, you know, obviously in relationships and in life, we can't do everything that everybody asks for us, but we have to be able to check in with ourselves, see if we want to, can we negotiate something different? How can we help that person get what they need and want without taxing ourselves? So these are the questions. And I think about codependency as just like a dynamic that traps you. It just, it's hard to get out of. It's hard to break out of that cycle. So physically, emotionally, logistically, something is missing, right? It's miscommunicated. It's frustrating. It lacks clarity. There's maybe a mismatch of goals or values. There's feelings of being misunderstood or not seen or not appreciated. So let's see. I want to think about some of the tendencies that you might think that you have going on. So let's think about some of the main signs that would come up if you had codependency. How would you know? How would you know that you do? How would you know that the person that you're dealing with does? So let's look at these signs. I'm going to read them out loud, and I just want you to sort of jot down a few words if you feel like any of these are you, any of these are your partner, any of these are some of the people that you're in regular contact. Okay. So the need for approval from others. So usually a person that's exhibiting this is they're exhibiting it in a way that they're selfless. They're really generous. They'll focus completely on you. And then by doing that, that's great when people are generous and really caring of other people. But the way it feels, though, is that they're doing it and they're overdoing because somehow that makes them feel good about themselves. And so I think if you're trying to recover from codependency, you really want to think, why am I doing all this stuff for somebody? Is it really for them, or is it for me to feel good about myself? Is that how I'm getting my identity? So the other is self-worth depends on what other people think. So there's a lot of need for external validation, a habit of taking on more work or more projects or more tasks than you can actually do. And this is because you want to feel like you're a good person, or you want to try to take and unburden somebody else, but it's not even, like it's done without checking in with yourself. A habit of apologizing or taking on the blame in order to keep peace. Like I'm going to avoid conflict. A tendency to minimize or ignore your own desires. An excess concern about a loved one's habits or behavior, like a real focus and over focus on whoever that person is. A habit of making decisions for others or trying to manage loved ones so that you feel safe, that you feel like you know what's going to happen, that you start picking up a mood change, and instead of talking about it or taking care of yourself, if someone else is moody, you actually kind of take on that mood too, like in order to, I don't know, mask it or just avoid addressing it. Feeling lots of guilt or anxiety when you're doing something for yourself. Doing things you don't really want to do just because it makes other people happy, which doesn't mean that you don't do things, right, that you don't want to do in relationships, but you should you negotiate your own needs in them. Typically, if you're in a healthy relationship, you're able to ask. Idealizing partners or loved ones, often to the point of maintaining the relationship, because you don't want to be abandoned. You don't want to be rejected, and you don't want to have to confront the things that are making you unhappy. So that's the catch-22, is that in a way, both people are missing each other. They're sort of being reactive to each other. And there's little or no conversation about all of these things. So what ends up happening is that these dynamics take over, and basically the people who are in the relationship are just dealing with the big, what would you call it? Sort of the loud noise of the dynamic, right? And the people who are in the relationship are really not seeing each other at all. The dynamic just takes over. So where does it stop? Where does it start? How do you stop it? How do you start it? It's difficult to break these habits. So let's see. Here's another definition of codependency. So codependent relationships are a specific type of dysfunctional relationship in which one person supports or enables another person's underachievement, irresponsibility, immaturity, addiction, procrastination, or poor mental health or physical health. You know, sometimes I think what happens is that the codependent looks healthier than the other person that they're focusing on. But actually, I think both people are equally in an unhealthy dynamic, because the codependent is actually hiding a lot in the caretaking of the other person, instead of what? So some of the things that I think attributes that the code, or not even attributes, but characteristics that the codependent person has, is that they actually have a really, really hard time saying no. They have a really hard time setting boundaries, feeling good about themselves, being able to confront things that make them uncomfortable. And in order to, hide from that or not deal with that, they just focus on someone else completely and blame that other person for it. That's so simple to say. And the reason why it's simple is once I talk about that side, I feel like I have to talk about the other side. And the dependent personality, or the needier person, actually doesn't say no either. Doesn't say like, no, I don't need that. You don't have to do that for me. I got it. I'm fine. I feel like you're way too focused on me. I really want you to, go and spend the day on your own, and we'll meet up later, and because what would that do? That might provoke the codependent person to feel really abandoned or rejected, right? So that's where the circular motion goes through. So I want you to think back. If you've had a dynamic where you felt like you were a part of it somehow, but you also knew the other person was a part of it, and what showed up was maybe conflict or upset, or feeling like you couldn't get on the same page with that person, what was it in your mind, if you could remember one time that you were able to wake up and say, oh, I'm doing this, or that person's doing that. I actually saw that that's what started to happen, and that's what I reacted to. So I want you to really think about that. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and jot down my own notes. And again, you don't have to talk about this. You can talk about it with me later. Or you can say something if you want. So any thoughts from anyone?
I'm happy to share a thought, Susan.
Okay.
I was just thinking of what that looked like for me in a past relationship, and I think it was definitely it was self-subjugating. It was prioritizing a partner's view of something that I really disagreed with, and, to my own detriment, having like an important value. In this case, it was family, a definition of it. And but allowing someone else's negative view of it to shape how I lived my life, even though it was something that was really important to me. And
Mhm.
I didn't see it in the moment. It was more important to keep the partner happy than it was to me to maintain this this thing that I really cared about. I just let it go. I kind of sacrificed something that was big.
And then what was the outcome? Like, how did that make you feel about what you had to let go of and yourself? And how did it make you feel about your partner at the time?
That was the irony. It didn't, in the background, it bred resentment on my part towards my partner. I felt bad about the family that I was giving up. And I don't think it did anything to make us closer, because ultimately she could feel that resentment underneath, like I was giving up something that was too much, like she was asking too much.
Hmm.
And therefore, none of it was worthwhile.
Right. So that would be, that would be easy. I mean, wonder if with all your skills now and what your insight you've been able to gain about all of these dynamics, what would you have done differently?
Had a clear boundary of like, well, this is actually something that's really important to me, and it's okay if it's not important to you, but I'm not gonna just give it up to make you happy. Like, we're gonna have, you kind of said it in some of the sidebars on, I was just looking, this is great, on Relatable, these daily tips. One was embrace independence, celebrate your individuality. So I think I could have just as easily embraced my independence with regard to this one sort of wedge issue. And the other side would have been, I think, your tip number 3 that you had on Relatable, which was about setting healthy boundaries. Like, didn't have that. There was too much overlap. And like you were saying in your definition of codependency, it's like I was looking to this person for approval as opposed to standing firm in what was important to me.
Mhm. Yeah, like I'm going to give this thing up because I think this is going to make you happy and then we'll be closer. But what happened was that instead of saying, I really need to negotiate that with you, it's not nothing I'm willing to give up, but we can figure out how to do that together so we can work out whatever stress it puts on the relationship, right?
That's
Um,
exactly right.
but if I give it up, I'm going to feel really resentful towards you, and you're going to feel that because usually when you're not communicating directly and you're communicating with sort of what would you call it, suppressed, because you suppress it, resentment, things are a little edgier, right? Like you communicate a little bit edgier, like you're not quite like the communication isn't flowing. You're not like so keen to embrace that person and have like a loving time together. It's like, you're taking something away from me. Now I'm unhappy. I'm giving you something that's, I'm thinking making you unhappier, but it's actually making me really unhappy, which is going to make you unhappy too. Right. My example
Exactly.
was something I heard to this week too, which is that someone that in a dynamic was trying to work with someone who they felt like always needed a lot of care, and they tried to set boundaries and say, I can only give you this much time to help you today. Um, and then when they saw where the person was at, they felt in a double bind, like they couldn't leave. Right. Uh, Wait, the person just really can't do this. Like they're not organized enough. Something's going on. I don't know what it is. But, and it was interesting because the person was describing to me that they had all this self-care set up so that they wouldn't stay longer. They had like a massage scheduled and some walk with a friend and all this stuff. So they ended up leaving. And but they felt like once they got away, they were like, okay, my head is coming back. I didn't have to overstay my stay. Um, because I had set really good boundaries for myself. But that first draw in, like, I'm going to give everything up because I know this person is in distress. And in a way, like, of course, it's an ER emergency, right? You're going to give stuff up because it's the right thing to do. But if it's like someone's self-imposing whatever they are on themselves, like not giving themselves enough time and then wanting you to come in and sort of save the day, and you say, no, I can't save the day. I can do a half an hour to help you out. Take all the stuff to the car and bring it to the dump, but that's all I can do. That's it. You know, there was a way that they could be released from that person's grip, even if that person was mad, because if they had stayed, the whole thing would have come in, the resentment, the person feeling like, you know, upset that they actually overdid and didn't want to do it. All of those dynamics come in, right? It's sort of similar. We had sort of a similar one. But to think about boundaries is such an important thing us humans like need to do better in a way in all relationships. And sometimes we can't. We get kind of stuck in situations like you have kids or you have elderly parents or you have, you know, your tree fell down or something like that. Sometimes you feel like you can't. But once you feel that resentment starts growing, you have to. You've got to. You've got to even talk about it. I'm going to feel really resentful if I stay. And that's not going to be good for either of us. Right? That's so honest. So, you know, you brought me to another part of the talk, which was like, what are the unhealthy communication patterns of codependency? And one is not saying no, passive aggressive communication, which means you go along with it, but you also, underneath the surface is hostility, right? So in a way like, sure, I'll come and visit your family, right? And the whole time they're pissed, right? That's not going to work either. That's not honest either, right? So we've got passive aggressive communication, resentful communication where you're on edge, you're doing stuff and you don't want to do it. The other is really immature communication. And immature communication could be anything: name calling, demanding, yelling. What else? What else is the immature? Not having the capacity to actually listen and reflect back what someone said so they feel heard. Not negotiating, not actually taking a time out if it's too accelerated, right? That's immature communication. So again, if we want the prana yet love, right, we have to know how to do this ourselves. And we also have to have the boundaries in place that if that we're across from somebody and they cannot do it, that we stop. No, not going to get in a fight with you about this, right? If they don't have the skill set, right? That's like the person I'm attracted to and the person that's good for me. If they don't have the skill set, you're not going to be able to have the conversation too. And that's something to really think about. And I always say this to my clients who are dating, like, can you put yourself in a situation that you actually can see the person you're sitting across from and their capacity, not like project on what you want them to do, what you want them to be, how you might be able to change them. That's another codependent dream, right? Is they might change. They might learn. Yeah, they might, but like we were saying in group yesterday, people watch for people's corrective behavior, right? Because no one's perfect all the time. You could have a bad day and lose it. You need to accept the apology if that happens with your partner. And hopefully you'll see that correction as you keep going on with them and then with you, right? So it's really maturing to be able to have that trauma love. Okay, so the other part I want to talk about is like the impact. I in my practice, I've seen so much impact of COVID on relationships. And that's sort of coming into fruition right now that people are really talking about what they've been through. And one of the things that it reminded me of was the difference between codependency and interdependency. And it's important to think about the systems that we live in. And in the systems that we live in, sometimes we have open systems and sometimes we have closed systems. Closed systems are more unhealthy because, and that's what happened during COVID, is that we had pods of 4 people in a pod or something like that during some of those times where we didn't get all of the external supports that we usually get in relationship. And so if we were just with our person, we were in a closed system. So if we weren't having really functional communication and functional connections, which a lot of people didn't during that time because it was a scary time and there wasn't a lot available. A lot of the needs were getting met by one person, which isn't realistic. So to have, whenever there's an unhealthy, maybe dynamic going on in a relationship, it's so important to have an open system so that you have other accesses to support and communication activities and connection. So you're not expecting everything from one person, but not only in codependency or in COVID, but in interdependent relationships where people can actually be their own person, be their individual person, have their own lives and careers and friendships and activities that they do outside their relationship that doesn't threaten the relationship, and that they're able to actually see the other person, understand the other person, cue into the other person, and talk about the things that might be the codependencies, tendencies in the interdependent relationship. Because when you're with people for a long time in long-term relationships, there's habits that form, right? We're 24/7 mind reading. Maybe you're like agreeing to a role that you really don't like you're the person that cooks, you're the person that buys the groceries, whatever it is, and being able to see you later, thanks for coming, being able to talk about whether you're actually in the role you want to be in, or whether you need to change out of that if there's ability to change and grow in the relationship. And I think that's one of the biggest parts about codependency, the cycle of codependency, is it doesn't feel like you can grow. It's like there's a glue between you two that feels like you can't get out of this cycle. Who did it first? And you can't grow. And everybody who's around this relationship, or you, if you're in a codependent relationship, gets affected by it because they see that there is an addiction in a way, like it's a relationship addiction. They see that there is a lot of enmeshment in the relationship versus an interdependent relationship where there isn't enmeshment. There's more self-respect and validation. So it's something to really think about. So I want you again to think about, is there any tendencies that you are seeing in yourself or the people around you, the codependent tendencies, that you really want to understand more, or you want to look at and be accountable for your part? So let's see, I'm going to keep going with my outline here, hoping that you all can slow down and write some of the things that are working for you. So sometimes when we are trying to do healthy relationships, we need to, and we're trying to understand aspects of codependency, we need to look at what are the aspects of healthy relationships. So just like in the trauma love example, we have mutual respect, independence and individuality, open communication, and support. And support is verbal, right? You ask for it. You don't mind read it. You ask, is this what you want? Is this what would help you? And I think we talked a little bit about communication patterns. I also want to talk about some of the causes of codependency. So some of the causes are, life happens, right? We are raised in families. Families go through different times. Not everyone plans all this out. There's generational patterns that happen, that families go through patterns, whether they've migrated to this country, whether there's been poverty, whether there's been success, whether there's been family tragedy. So, and then different characteristics develop from that. And so sometimes we're trying to get, like, it's a 3-generation loop. So the impact of what happened in one generation lasts 3 generations. So to really heal from that, you need to actually know, okay, what has my family been through? And this is some of the learning that I did in my family. So there may be overprotective parents. You may have had overprotective parents that have inhibited you from being able to develop really healthy boundaries because you really didn't have to. Your parents did that for you. So you really have to learn how to do that. You might have had childhood trauma, like neglect and abuse, and that impacts people greatly. And that's something to really look at. How does that play out in your relationships? Because mostly it might play out as not trusting people so much or not really having good boundaries. There may also be mental health conditions that you either grew up in, like depression or bipolar or anxiety in your family, and there may be just genetic traits that you have to watch. That is also going to be something that you have to work with in your relationships, so that you don't create codependency, that you are, or your partner's able to really work on whatever it is that's mental health issues, and that you're also able to work on those with that person without becoming emotionally unhealthy too. So I want to make sure that I get all this information out that I prepared for you. So I'm just going to scan to see what I have not talked about. All right. So we talked a lot about this idea about self-esteem, and it's really hard to have a healthy relationship if you don't have good self-esteem or another person doesn't, because that you're involved in, because it's really hard to talk honestly with people who are so fragile or sensitive or always feel criticized or judged. It's really difficult. So what can you do if you want to have that trauma love? You have to develop yourself to be able to have it. And one of it is having really good self-esteem. So being your biggest fan, right? Really encouraging yourself, positive self-talk, resisting criticizing yourself. So thinking about, like, is in your head, you're always on your case. Is that what you're doing to yourself? Create other focuses that are healthy for you. Take steps if you're in an unhealthy relationship to try to separate yourself from the relationship and start adding other things to the relationship so that you can start developing your own healthy sense of self. That can go a long way in a relationship if you start becoming healthy. Figure out who you are. Turn your attention inwards and check in on yourself. How are you doing? Is this making you uncomfortable? How can you make yourself more comfortable? Having that talk by dropping in and checking in. So right now, let's do that as an example. Just like take a minute. I've been talking about a lot of concepts, and just drop in, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Every once in a while, do that, especially if you're starting not to track yourself so well, or you're starting to feel some intense feeling coming up. Stand up for yourself if you feel like you're starting to control something or micromanage, like, hey, I only have so much time today. I can't do all those things for you. Start saying no when you really don't want to do something. And you can say, maybe we can negotiate how to spend the afternoon, but I don't want to spend my whole afternoon doing that. And then try to communicate more effectively. I statements. I'm feeling this way. When this happens. And then validating yourself, like really look at how much do you give in relationships, how much do you withdraw in relationships. So maybe you're withdrawing for a reason, right? And you need to actually do a little bit of thinking about what is the reason and speak about that. I'm getting really quiet now because I feel like, you're starting to raise your voice, or, and then also think about, things that you like about yourself, self-validating. What makes you feel good about yourself? What are the 3 characteristics that make you feel good about yourself? You like how you dress, you like that you're friendly to your neighbors, you really have a great time when you go walk your dog in the park, those kinds of things. Noticing the things that you do, and noticing the things that you feel and speaking about them. So oftentimes people think about their communication style, like, how can I improve my communication style, instead of, again, blaming the other person for theirs. So I always find the basic one to do all the time is to just do active listening, like stop and really listen to what someone else is saying. even if you're like, they told me the same story 5 times, your response could be stop, listen, and say, that's an important story that you are telling me, because I know you've mentioned it before and it's really important to you. That story really meant a lot to you. You don't have to criticize them for saying it, but it is about letting them know you heard them and that you got that it was important. And also, you might want to just remind people that you heard them and you see them and you understand why that was important, empathizing with them. I understand why that's important to you. I get that you feel sad about that or really proud about that. So it's that reflective, empathetic listening, right? Where you're really reflecting back to them what you heard and then also empathizing with the feelings that they're having. So where do you start? Building your self-esteem, looking at some of the characteristics in yourself that you might need to work with that need a little attention, right? To have healthier relationships. The insecurities, we all have them. Where are they? And how can you work on them? So I was looking for 3 pointers that I could give you in closing about if you feel like you're in a codependent dynamic or have codependent tendencies for whatever reason. Part of ways to start breaking through this is mindfulness. Really spend some time getting to know yourself and how you think and your thoughts. I've been doing this 21-day intention, which involves like meditating, writing down gratitude, and writing down some synchronistic, really great thing that happened. And it's been really helping me slow my thoughts down. And sometimes if you just do a 2-5-minute meditation, even just taking a breath or doing a handstand or walking around the block, to just be with yourself a little bit during the day, calm yourself down, learn to have boundaries. Boundaries are not about just saying no. It's about really understanding yourself and admitting that you have sort of limitations on what you can do or what makes you feel uncomfortable. It's okay to say, I need to have a boundary there because I'm going to overdo or do too much or feel resentful. It's okay to say that. And learning how to say things so that people can hear them is another art, right? The art of communicating. And also just having a lot of empathy about that codependency is a trauma response. It's a way that you have learned to cope. And so learning new coping skills like boundaries, like having good self-esteem, like saying no, like validating yourself, having self-respect, learning different coping skills is going to help diminish your codependent tendencies and really holding on to your why. Why are you in these relationships that you're in? What kinds of things are you loving about your life? What kinds of things do you want to change about your life and the way you spend your time? And what are you here to do on the planet? It's not so much about accomplishing, but being. Who are you here to be with? And are you comfortable with the people you're with? I hope this helped. Please slow it down, jot your notes down. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you want to have more discussion about any part of this talk. I'm so happy to be doing this work and sharing this work that I do with you. So any questions, concerns, you know how to find me. And thank you so much for showing up today. I really loved that you were a part of this. Bye for now.